Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Fireside Chat, Strengthening Operational Resilience in Banking. I'm Karen Glazier, Senior Director of Marketing here at Crossviews, and I have the pleasure today to speak with Keith Pearson, Global Head of Financial Services Go-to-Market at ServiceNow. Prior to joining ServiceNow, Keith led technology transformation at Lloyd's banking group, which is one of the big four banks in the UK. And what he learned in that experience, along with where he is now in ServiceNow, is really a treasure trove of tricks, tips, lots of advice and lessons learned for banks on how to think about, approach, and ultimately succeed with building sustainable operational resilience. Hey, Keith, how are you today?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks, Karen. Nice to be here.
I'm really excited about our chat today. I know you and I have talked quite a bit about operational resilience over the last couple of weeks, and I think you're going to really bring forth a lot of, I would say, new ways of thinking about that and some actionable tips for folks to really take and use immediately. So before we jump in, though, for those of you out there who have not yet had a pleasure to meet Keith, I thought, Keith, maybe you could give us an overview of your role at ServiceNow so they understand, what you do and what you're striving to achieve over at least the next year or two.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Karen. So, hi everybody. Good afternoon. ServiceNow has started to industry verticalize. We've grown significantly over the course of the last 10, 15 years, as you know, and I think at the particular point in what's known as hyper growth of large technology companies, I think Salesforce went through a similar phase maybe 4 or 5 years ago. It makes logical sense to start to, deliver solutions that are specific for the industries that you support and those customers. And in our case, financial services is a really important industry vertical. We already have around 1,000 financial services customers globally. And in most places, those customers use our technology to deliver IT services, IT service management, and run IT operations, and in some cases, much more broadly than that. What we're looking to achieve really with industry verticalization is really to bring the power of the ServiceNow platform and start to apply it much more broadly than in that IT environment. So there are lots of capabilities that we've built, whether it's integration or workflow or analytics or data management, automation, machine learning, all of those capabilities that exist in the ServiceNow platform that are applied so successfully to IT, we believe have a real place to help transform right across the financial services enterprise. So that really is going to be our focus over the next year or so, and that is therefore my focus.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for that. So you bring up transformation. As you well know, anyone who dove into the topic of digital transformation, there's a lot of different definitions out there, right? So some say it's about technology, some say it's about culture, some say it's about the customer. You live the world of digital transformation, specifically focusing on the technology side of it at Lloyd's banking group. How do you define digital transformation, and what does success feel like when you go down that path to transform?
Sure. Well, in terms of definition, I spent 10 years at Lloyd's, and I've spent my entire career in technology management, technology transformation. And I think that there are, as you say, lots and lots of different ways to define what it is. One that's very common focuses very much on that sort of user experience layer. And I guess everything really comes down to that. It's down to customer experience. How do we ensure that the digital technologies that are available make that customer experience as great as it and seamless and integrated as it can possibly be? But I think because of that, people have got a little bit focused on that UX layer, mobile capability and online digital capability on the front end. And from my perspective, digital transformation goes much deeper than that. So in order to be able to provide a seamless integrated experience to the customer through something like a mobile app, you actually have to have all of your systems, workflows, data, and so on in the background. All of that needs to be integrated and connected. Otherwise, in the case of a bank, the experience that a customer would have on the mobile device can be very, very different from feel very disjointed from the experience they have when they walk into the branch, or the experience they have when they pick up the phone and phone a contact center. Without all of the systems that underpin that support and deliver those services to customers being integrated in the background, you really have a challenge there. What does it feel like? I think when you get it right, it feels like pace, it feels like energy, it feels like things are being delivered in days, weeks, and maybe months rather than months and years. And I think, we have got very, very used to whatever it is that we call digital transformation still being characterized by projects that take 18 months or take 2 years. And that's not digital transformation for me, because you don't get the same feeling from delivering projects over that length of time and seeing, improvements that you're waiting for 18 months to get.
So this actually brings something else in mind for me. So the challenges. So talking about and defining digital transformation obviously is one piece of it, and getting a really solid definition based on exactly what you're trying to achieve and what your customers and your market expect from you. But doing it is completely different. Diving in and actually taking that plan and implementing upon that plan. So with your background and experiencing this before, what sort of challenges did you see that risked going down the path of transforming and getting to that solid foundation of operational resilience? Like, what were those roadblocks you faced?
Yeah, so whether it's digital transformation or it's delivering an operational resilience capability, in actual fact, the actions you take in terms of the delivery of end-to-end services and the ability to join them up, the actions you take are the same. Getting to operational resilience as a bank or insurance company, actually an awful lot of the same things that you would do to digitally transform deliver that outcome. And I think in terms of the blockers, maybe some of these won't come as surprises to people who are on the call, but culture, politics, organizationally siloed thinking. That's before you even dive into the problems with the technology. We've got challenges with the technology around fragmentation and legacy and different systems that have been connected together with big engineering teams over the core IT teams over the course of the last 20 years. It's difficult, it's difficult to maintain operational resilience. And when that's going on, there's that level of complexity, therefore so many things that could potentially go wrong. It's impossible for people really to have their eyes on all of it at one time. And then the kind of the complexity, yes, but also just the very nature of the fact that these systems are not necessarily designed to talk to each other makes it difficult too. But for me, the biggest challenges are those organizational and cultural ones. I don't believe it can be done. One of my least favorite sayings actually that I heard many, many times is in meetings, particularly scoping meetings at the beginning of major transformation initiatives is, let's not boil the ocean, or let's not eat the whole elephant, and that actually is a statement that people make when they're fearful of, just how big it could be. But, making that statement and refining the scope in a particular, when you're talking about major transformation, doesn't actually address the problem. The problem's still there. The ocean is still there. The elephant is still walking around. So if you don't actually get a sense of that it is an elephant you're trying to change or eat, or if it is an ocean that you're trying to boil and where the perimeters of that ocean are, then you're never ever going to be able to make it happen. And all you end up doing is you take your little bit of the ocean and you start to bubble away with that, and then you realize that somebody you know, a mile down that way has also been bubbling up their little bit of the ocean, and someone else over there at the other side of the ocean has been doing something completely different. And before you know it, you know, opportunities to actually integrate and bring things together and genuinely digitally transform at scale have been missed. And worse than that, actually, each one of those little boiling pots has created another silo, another fragment, and actually made the problem of solving the whole thing more difficult. So yeah, that would be my thinking on it.
That makes sense. So if you have the elephant or the ocean, the reality is you need the vision. So you need to see what's down the road to understand, to your point, what are those bits and pieces? What are those wins we need along the way, which are really the stepping stones, right, to getting to the ultimate vision of where you're trying to be with digital transformation.
Absolutely.
Interesting. I've read quite a few of your blogs on operational resilience, and you mentioned the 6 C's, which I found very interesting. So can you talk a little bit about what they are and why they're important to constantly keep top of mind as someone's looking to transform?
Yeah, so you know, it's every time I ran a project or a program in the bank, it always started off with a conversation about a business case, always, you know, and that's just the way that we work. There has to be a business case. And we'd get into a conversation quickly about what we called hard and soft benefits. And an awful lot of the things that digital transformation really delivers are soft benefits. They are about the customer experience. They're about the colleague, as we call them in Lloyd's, experience. You know, it's things that are not necessarily tangible and certainly don't relate to cost necessarily and directly. And then the hard benefits are about cost. That's cost reduction and compliance and implementing control. And it might be a piece of regulatory work and you just need to achieve an end. So for me, the 6 C's, the reason I started talking about the 6 C's was when I started working with ServiceNow in the bank, I started to realize that you could deliver business cases that delivered lots and lots of the outcomes without compromise. So you could actually reduce cost, you could improve the customer experience and the colleague experience, you could improve the level of control that you had in your organization and become more compliant. And actually, that's 5 C's. The 6th C was the idea that with ServiceNow, you know, you could build on a foundation that you didn't have to come back to and start again ever. You build that solid foundation and you continuously improve. Because ServiceNow is on that single platform, single code base, you start to continually improve what you're delivering. And as you do that, everything connects to everything else. So for me, the 7th C, if you like, is compromise. You know, you don't have to compromise when you're delivering programs with ServiceNow. And I know that that would be the sort of thing that everyone would expect me to say now that I work for ServiceNow. but that was what I was saying for 3 years when I was in that bank, because I just had never really worked with technology before that allowed people's experience to improve at the same time as actually reducing the cost of delivery or the cost of operations as you were going. That was, yeah, that was different.
You know, I really like the mindset of those 6 C's. I think they make a lot of sense. And I think it also provides people a blueprint of the key pieces they need to keep in mind as they're going down that journey. It's interesting too, we deal with it here at Crossviews as well. The ServiceNow calls it the messy middle. So it's a technology ecosystem that has a lot of technology around systems and tools that's doing this or it's doing that. And nothing's really connected and nothing's really talking and communicating with one another. And looking into that abyss of the fragmented systems, again, that messy middle, I know I hear it from customers before we start working with them, and I'm sure you've heard it both at Lloyd's and ServiceNow. That is a really daunting feeling when you look into that abyss of all this stuff that sits behind the scenes and you say to yourself, how am I going to make all of this work better and bring it into that one platform mindset? And, you know, that is scary right? So how did you back at Floyd's and what you're doing with ServiceNow folks, how do you prescribe starting that? How do you start to defragment the systems and get it onto that one platform in a digestible way so that people don't feel that overwhelming, oh my gosh, I gotta boil this ocean immediately?
Sure. So you start off, as I said earlier, by at least having an understanding of what the end game is, what that big picture end game looks like. And you can articulate that in terms of, just really outcomes, business outcomes. You don't have to dive into the detail of whether this system and that system is going to enable this, that, and the next thing. People get into technology and technology discussions too quickly when they're looking to try and define those outcomes. So you start off with that big outcome. And then my approach was always to pick something that was small and achievable and could deliver significant value quickly. So it could be an end user compute solution, a Microsoft Access database that had been created 10 years ago, that was all of a sudden had evolved and was underpinning an important process, or a SharePoint and an Excel environment where we were managing risk and so on, and we didn't have that coherent joined up view of those types of things. Pick something small. And the important thing about that is that if it's small but important, it means that with something like ServiceNow, you generally speaking can fix it quickly. So we took one last year in the payments environment that had been problematic for a while. Internal audit had a look at this particular end user compute solution. It was underpinning a critical process, and there's an audit action against it. It has got to be taken out and replaced with something. But there was no way of finding technology across the bank that was able to do that in a cost-effective or timely way. We were in October last year. It had to be done by Christmas time. So we went in with the ServiceNow platform and we started to talk about, okay, what does this problem look like? How do we fix it? And when we got into that with the business, we recognized that we were likely to be able to do it in 6 weeks or so. And so at a fraction of the cost that had previously been considered for fixing this thing that needed to be done, and a real fraction of the timescales in the end, we built it in 4 weeks and deployed it into production. We were able to demonstrate to the stakeholders in the bank and to the owners, those payment operations colleagues, that we could do something really, really quickly, really disrupt the whole notion of what digital transformation should feel like. And of course, what that did was that then had the knock-on effect of building belief, building trust. And that's when it's much, much more sensible to go in and start to extend the investment that you make. Not at the beginning when you're looking 18 months down the road and saying, I'll get the value then, that's all good. But by that time, you've spent 10, 12, 15, 20 million, in our case, pounds, dollars. It's spend a small amount of money, deliver something important quickly, recognize that value, recognize how you've managed to create that value, and then extend from there. And that would always be my approach to people. I'd never ever encourage people to go for those kind of big bang, take the whole chunk in one go approaches. It very, very rarely, in my experience, works.
Yeah, I echo that. We see that too. A lot of folks think, oh, it's a rip and replace. And they think they need to do everything at once. And they don't realize what you just said, that it's taking those chunks, finding those quick wins, because you do want to generate confidence within the organization that investment in ServiceNow was the right investment, and give them a sampling of what they could be doing with the platform. And that too, I think, is where a lot of ideas and demand from other areas of the business start to pop up and get into discussions. You mentioned throughout there timelines. And tell me a little bit about the importance of speed. So when you're looking at getting some of these things done to get to a better operational place, is speed important? I mean, what are you looking at? Are you thinking, is it good to start something and get something out relatively fast? Is it something that you kind of plan out on more of a scheduled approach? How does the speed play into all that?
Yeah, so for me, if we tie together two of the things that we've been talking about, the notion that some of the blockers to digital transformation are culture, siloed thinking. The longer you take to deliver something, the more opportunity there is for cultural influences to start to take hold. This project's not working properly. It's not going well. I've heard from the program manager that they're struggling with this integration. All of those things the longer it goes on, the more those things start to kind of take a bit of hold. If you've got a very, very tight timescale on that first, MVP, some people call it minimum viable product, if you've got a tight timescale on that, there's no time for the organizational politics to take hold. You're underway, you're doing it, and you've delivered something before anyone can really intervene. And I think the great thing about ServiceNow is that because ServiceNow is on a single platform and a single code base, when you build an integration from ServiceNow to something, to another system, whether it's through Integration Hub or you have to build a new bespoke integration from the platform, that integration is reusable every single time you want to use it. So in our case, if you integrate ServiceNow to the core banking system to deliver one use case, and that takes you 12 weeks, the next time you go to actually deliver something that requires data from the core banking system, it's all there. And so your workflow delivery and that process delivery goes from 12 weeks to 6, and then from 6 weeks to 4. And so it's that sort of capability that exists in the platform that's very, very uncommon. Many enterprise systems today, although they portray the view of being a single platform, are not. They're made up of individual components, and if you want to integrate those components to something, you need to build individual and maintain individual integrations. The power of ServiceNow is that you do it all in one place, and so the deliveries just get quicker and quicker and quicker as you go along. Yeah.
You and I spoke a couple of weeks ago about this very topic, and we were chatting a little bit about speed. And it was interesting because I think what we touched on was sometimes you can accomplish multiple things. You can satisfy multiple needs within an organization from even different departments into one solution within the platform. So how does somebody, I guess you could gain a lot of speed if you knew all these different needs coming from different areas. You could build solutions that address multiple needs versus just singular needs, which I think would slow things down a bit and maybe not be as integrated, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the experience that we had, we knew that if we got a single data model, what we call technology data model for the group in one place, that we could start to extend that. And this was at the heart of our operational resilience activity, actually, was we connected that data model, if you like, to the business processes that they supported. So the applications were connected real time to the business processes that were being delivered. And when you start to do that, you start to see the joins, because an organization like a bank or an insurance company, it should operate as one organism. Everything should be integrated and connected. The sourcing department and the finance department, the IT department, and the lines of business, and and the people out there selling in the field, those things should operate as one. And once you get to the point where you can see a sort of data reflection, let's call it a digital twin in the technology model that says this is how this all comes together, you start to have really, really great ideas about solutions that you can build for one part of the organization that benefit lots and lots of other parts of the organization. And that creates what I was referred to as win-wins. The money's coming down into one line of business, let's say the CIO's budget, but actually by creating something for the CIO, we built solutions sometimes that were actually meeting the needs of the chief risk officer or a line of business leader. And so what we would do is we would go and have a conversation with that executive and say, we just built something over here, yes, using the CIO's money, but actually this benefits you. And so you create this situation where a chief risk officer and a chief information officer start to have conversations about how the solutions that they've got actually marry up and connect. And then it's amazing that starts to feel like you are getting somewhere, because all of a sudden you're not having a conversation that says, well, the budget for risk is here, and the budget for HR is here, and the budget for IT is here, and the budget for payments is here, and the budget for mortgages and retail is over here, and there's absolutely no way that we can spend that budget, horizontally across the organization. We'll just do the best job we can, spend it into the verticals. We started to disrupt that. We started to create a problem for those executives, but on the other hand, actually a really great conversation. They were able to go into meetings and slap each other on the back about how they had contributed to connecting up their parts of the organization. And that's a great thing to see. When you see that through a technology program or a series of technology initiatives, you've achieved something like that, then that's really great. And that again accelerates it. It builds its own culture, if you like. It is, in my mind, it is the culture of digital transformation. It's the culture of success, and it's very, very infectious. And people want to then become part of it, and they realize that they can use the technology to do that as well.
Yeah, more demand, good problem to have.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So it's interesting, just like the defragmentation goal with the systems, it sounds like what you're saying is, let's defragment these siloed need buckets. So let's look at, if we're doing X, how does that satisfy more than one need? So leveraging that solution into multiple areas of the organization, I think definitely has high value and high benefit. So I know that there are you told me about some really great use cases about what defragmentation and workflow automation can do for a bank in particular. Can you share that with some of the folks here? Because I found them pretty impressive what can actually happen when you do the defragmentation effort that you talk about.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just give some generic examples, if I may. So you take an environment where, let's take a payments environment, a payment operations environment, where there are a number of disconnected systems. And those disconnected systems, over the course of time, because they're disconnected, there are gaps in them, and those gaps have been filled by the Excel spreadsheets and the PowerPoints. So you go into that payment operations environment, and there are still lots of people who are physically picking up pieces of paper and passing them over towards each other. Now that has ended. That's ended as a consequence of what's happened this year. But the virtual equivalent of that's still going on. And then, because we've got that sort of fragmented environment, what we do is we try and fix it in a fragmented way. And we start to think about, okay, how could we integrate and join these things up? So we say RPA, robotic process automation is going to fix this for us. What we'll do is we'll scrape from data from here, we'll plonk it into that one there, we'll move it on the process and so on. So, in a use case that's very dear to my heart, that was exactly what had happened. And the technologies that you would see in that environment, you would recognize they are major, and significant technologies in today's enterprise environment. Sorry, apologies. And so what we did was we looked at how ServiceNow could be integrated in with the core systems and replace all of that sort of messy middle that you talk about, including the RPA robots, which actually had only been implemented over the course of the last 18 months. And to give you just a sense of the improvement in performance, it was relating to what are called a standing order and direct debit unable to apply. So they run on the batch overnight and they don't operate necessarily properly, and then the next morning there are some exceptions. I think in that particular use case, 28 cases were being processed in an hour using that old technology, if you like, situation that I was talking about. When the system went live, within about a week and a half, ServiceNow was processing 2,000 in 4 minutes. So you go from 28 in an hour to 2,000 in 4 minutes through API-driven automation, cleaning up the fragments, joining everything together. And as you can imagine, that is just a game changer for that business, and it's those sorts of stats that ServiceNow can deliver. And when I read about hyper automation at the moment, and the fact that every definition you look at of hyper automation talks about a series of tools and techniques that need to be applied to the fragmented scenario, including RPA, including machine learning, including AI, of course, what really that does is it encourages people to fragment more, is to go out and get those RPA techs and those AI techs and those ML techs and start to build and bolt on solutions that aren't actually solving the whole problem. From our perspective, we're massive fans of hyper automation at ServiceNow, but we embed hyper automation into our platform. RPA goes into the platform in Quebec. Machine learning's been in the platform for 2 years, virtual agent, all those things are embedded into that kind of single technology capability that you deploy into the environment. So you solve all the problems in one go.
And imagine what that employee feels like, right? When you can go at that speed, get access to everything you need that easily and that quickly. It must improve morale tremendously because they can serve their customer better and faster with more confidence to say, yeah, I can get that, I can get it quickly, and I can get the accurate information that you need. So that makes complete sense, and that's a pretty impressive story. Yeah.
And one thing I'd say about it, Karen, is let's put it out there. The elephant in the room that we're trying to eat. People are terrified of that. People actually doing their jobs. They think, well, wait a minute. You've just taken all that work that used to take me an entire day to do, and you've just cleared it. You've just cleared my backlog. You've just taken away all my work.
Do I still have a job?
Exactly. And I think so people are terrified of that as the possibility. I always try to encourage people to think about it a different way. Is if you are able to clear up all that mess, that administration that you have to do, the pain of actually doing your day-to-day job, one, you become more productive as an organization, but two, it frees you up to become a knowledge worker, not a processor of spreadsheets, but a knowledge worker, somebody who's actually in that situation, has been hired to help the customer, has been hired to make the customer's experience better. And I think if as organizations and as a community and actually as an industry, if we could get our heads around the fact that that's actually possible, and the 6 C's are possible, you can reduce the cost, increase you can do all of that in one place. Actually, I think that's a great outcome for everyone. Everyone gets, highly motivated by that. And as an organization, I certainly, in my previous employer, there was a really strong cultural feeling that we were succeeding in digital transformation. And I can't begin to tell you the feeling that gave people in our organization about what we were doing, in that bank. It was remarkable. It really was. Yeah.
So a C is creativity too. And I think you nailed it. I think it's all about when you can boost morale through making work better. You're giving that employee the ability to think creatively about their job and think creatively about how they're going to serve that next customer. And when somebody has that ability to breathe a little bit in their job and think about their job, not just do their job, they're not just contributing to the company because hopefully they're coming up with new ways to be efficient and productive and all that great stuff, but they're also improving their own career. And that's a really good feeling to go to work every day feeling like, hey, I have the chance to think about things and maybe do things a little bit better and make my job and other people's job a little bit better. So I think that's a real exciting outcome when you're dealing with a platform like ServiceNow. And I did hear a little something about this new application that ServiceNow has recently announced, the financial services operations application. And I'm really interested. I've done a deep dive in that myself, as you know, but can you share a little bit about what that is and how it's different than what is currently on the platform and why it's so specific to the financial services industry?
Yeah, sure. So it's it's at the heart really of our industry verticalization. It's all about the fact that we've taken what's already a great platform, and we've taken what was the customer services management part of the platform, case management and so on, and we've extended that by building, using the banking industry architecture network, a data model, a reference data model, a data model that recognizes an account, a current account, and how a current account relates to a payment, how a payment relates to a customer, how a customer relates to onboarding, KYC, all the different components you'd expect to see operating in a financial services organization. And in the same way that ServiceNow, if you deploy it into the IT environment, it immediately recognizes it. You don't have to train ServiceNow to understand the interaction between an incident, a problem, and a change in a request. You can configure it, and then you can get it live. So that's the idea with financial services operations. You can put it into an organization in the business lines in the messy middle, and it already recognizes how those things should interact. On top of that data model, there's more. We've started to build applications that are bespoke and out of the box for different use cases across the enterprise. So we started in payments with payment operations, things like payments in error, unable to apply, I mentioned earlier on. And then we've also this year released card operations. So for credit and debit cards, things like lost and stolen debit card. We're building at the moment loans. So we'll have a capability for loans, both commercial and retail, mortgages, disputes, and a whole range of other applications that sit on top of, again, that single platform. And if you think about what that's able to do, it means that when we deploy ServiceNow into a banking or a financial services environment, the amount of configuration that needs to be done by the customer to get to a production deployment is so much less than it would need to be with some of our competitors' products, where you have to build and configure an awful lot of that capability to get it to the point where it's production ready. And it's that gap that takes time. It's that gap that equals a 6-month program or a 9-month program or a year-long program. And what we're doing is we're compressing the gap. So we're giving you something that's out of the box, requires maybe 20, 30% configuration on your end. 12 weeks later, you've got a solution that's live. And that's going to be the difference with financial services operations. And the other thing is, because everything on ServiceNow is connected to everything else, when you start deploying those solutions into that middle office line of business, you start to connect up all the different bits of the middle office. So, in a big bank, your retail banking experience and your commercial banking experience starts to become coherent. You start to get that sort of single view of the way that the organization manages its customers, and those things in turn are connected into the back office. The place where ServiceNow started, the IT environment, the HR environment, the risk environment, the security environment. So imagine a world where your messy middle is integrated and connected to your back office, and your messy middle is integrated and connected to your channels, whether that's a digital platform or a call center or a branch. And all of a sudden, what you've done is you've connected front to back your financial services organization. And that's really where we want to go with that part of the platform. Yeah.
That's refreshing to hear. Being a customer, obviously, as we all are with our bank, it's nice to know that that is what's happening, and that's what's being talked about, because there's nothing worse as a customer than to be reaching out to your bank and waiting and having different information being discussed, or someone doesn't understand your information and they can't get to your information. So hearing about all that connection from front to back office and cleaning up the messy middle is nothing short of very refreshing, both I think from the bank perspective, but also the customer perspective for sure. So I'm excited to see what you bring about, more of those applications, like you said, that can bolt onto that core.
Yeah.
So Keith, I have been noticing as we're talking that we're getting quite a few questions in our chat. So I think you're going to be busy the next few minutes with quite a few questions. So I want to pass this over to Bridget again. And Bridget, could you address some of those questions with Keith? And Keith, take your time answering.
Absolutely. And just a
Seriously.
reminder to the rest of our audience, if you have questions still, you can feel free to use that chat widget and Q&A widget to send them over, and we'll address as many as we have time for. So Keith, the first question that came in is, can you touch more on why it's essential to put data and technology at the heart of your operational resilience strategy?
Sure, yeah. So the whole notion of operational resilience, certainly in the way that the Bank of England defines it as, you know, in the consultation papers that have been out this year, is that it's about looking at your end-to-end business services, the services you deliver to your customers, and being able to look at the way that, how resilient those services are, in the context of the resources that underpin the services. So if you start with IT, you know, the technology that supports the service, the people who support that service, whether it's in an operational environment or the people who support the technology that support the service, the facilities that support that service, and the third parties that support that service. And if you think about that end-to-end service and all those different resource components, the way that those resources have been managed historically is in those vertical silos that we just talked about, those different systems of record for procurement, for HR, for IT, you know, for facilities. So in order to be able to bring all of that together to give you a real-time coherent view of your resilience of that service, you need to take all of that data, you need to put it somewhere. And then you need to use that data to be able to, if you like, bring together that single view of the service and highlight the areas where there are resilience gaps and where there are potential challenges. So, you know, I've seen in the past organizations try to deal with this sort of thing through, believe it or not, spreadsheets and pivot tables and all the rest of it, you know, different source data coming in and trying to really manipulate it to give a position. And that's fine, you know, that'll give you a once and done position on the resilience of that service for, you know, let's say a regulatory conversation or an executive conversation. But the problem is, the next day, the technology changes. You know, there's a technology change made to the infrastructure, there's an improvement made to an application. Some of these end-to-end services and financial services might have, you know, 120 applications underpinning them. You know, people leave the organization, people come into the organization, third-party relationships are severed and new ones are created. So that's an ever-changing environment underneath that service. You're never going to manage that with spreadsheets. You need to find a way of being able to bring technology and data together, or data together relating to that, so that you can manage resilience effectively. So that's why it's so important to put technology and data, in our case, ServiceNow, and the data held in ServiceNow at the heart of the solution for OpRes.
Great. And another one coming in is, how realistic is it to expect that firms will be able to build predictive capabilities for operational resilience?
I think it's realistic, but I think it goes back to the question that I just answered, is until you have the data in one place. If you think about machine learning, how does machine learning really work? You know, you set thresholds and you set rules around the behavior of a system. And then what you really are asking the machine to do is learn what happens when those rules and systems are you know, those particular thresholds are met or broken in the future. So in the scenario of let's say a major payments outage, you know, there are a set of there's a set of activity that's happening before that payment outage happens. You know, there's a overcapacity on a network switch. There's a server that's starting to struggle a bit. There's a problem with monitoring and alerting that misses a particular break somewhere, let's say in the mainframe or in the core banking system. And so what you need to be able to do is have the data in one place to be able to say that set of circumstances, the last time this broke, this is what was happening. But machine learning applied on something like the ServiceNow platform allows you to build those kind of rules and to say, yeah, we know that the last time there was a payment outage, this happened here, that happened on the mainframe, that happened in the network, this happened on that particular server, and then we had a major outage. And so being able to build that predictive capability in allows you to get ahead of it. allows ServiceNow to be able to tell you, in 30 minutes, there's an 80% chance you're going to have an outage on this particular component or this particular part of the system that's going to have a knock-on effect. So I think, predictive resilience is absolutely possible, but you need to start on the journey of getting the data into that one place and on modern technology that can have AI and machine learning and so on applied to that data to allow you to get to that predictive place. It's not a, it really is not a sort of moonshot. It's not a hit and hope. It's very much more of a kind of structured, logical way of thinking through how do you get to a place where you have a stronger level of resilience in your organization.
Keith, just to add to that, I would think in our world today, there's nothing more important than having access to one source of truth, right?
Yeah.
So if we just went through over the last almost a year, a good lesson about being agile. As any organization, it could be a bank, it could be anything. And I would think agility means understanding what your company has as far as data, because when you react to something, you got to have the data to understand what you're reacting to, right? So I would think that at this point, this is a really critical lesson for everyone about being agile, moving quickly, but data is such a critical piece to that puzzle.
Of course, and we you go back a year when we would be sitting thinking about operational resilience, if we were talking about what were called unforeseen, severe but plausible outcomes, severe but plausible events that could happen, black swan events they were referred to as. And I think generally speaking, you're thinking about that, the majority of your thinking would go towards a failure in the IT systems or a cyber attack or even a terrorist attack, unfortunately. But I don't think anybody would have sat there foreseeing, and I suppose that's the point, a global pandemic that puts people resilience and facilities resilience actually at the heart of the delivery of operational resilience. And so I think that this year, unfortunately, has just made the point, we can't predict what's ahead of us. But if we've got the right data and the right systems and they're integrated and we've got that single view, we can react quickly and address the implications of those unforeseen circumstances in a way today that we might not have been able to do in the past. So yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad I sat at this table. I get to bang it when I'm talking and answering my questions.
You can have all those marks.
I feel as if I should be on the ballot box or something. It's probably a bad joke.
Always good to have a prop with you, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
You touched earlier a little bit on continuous improvement, and this one question here says, can you elaborate more on or offer some examples of what opportunities exist to demonstrate continuous improvement in operational resilience?
Yeah, I can. So if you take IT resilience as an example, I would subdivide IT resilience down into a number of different categories. Give you some examples. So monitoring and alerting, capacity management, encryption, patching and certification, availability, performance, maybe architecture and design, the way that applications consume infrastructure. Those are all IT resilience categories for me. And I think what you want to really be able to do is to get to a position for each of those categories where you've got a baseline measurement of the resilience for a given critical application or a given, if you like, important business service. So if you take an important business service that has, let's say, 35 applications, critical applications that underpin it, you want to kind of systematically have a baseline of the resilience position across each one of those different categories. And so that's your base. That's how resilient you are today. But as I said earlier, the next day some changes are made and you maybe are less resilient or maybe more resilient. So how do you start to work out whether you're less resilient or more resilient for that application, for that process, in this particular IT resilience category? Well, actually, you have to start to digitize. You have to start to integrate and connect the systems of record that are managing that. Let's take monitoring and alerting. In our bank, we use Dynatrace and App Dynamics across our digital and if you like, traditional environment. And they were our monitoring and alerting tools. So the ability to be able to integrate those monitoring and alerting tools into the ServiceNow engine for IT resilience in that case, given us the ability to actually feed that data straight through. And what you've done is you've taken that from a, if you like, point in time attestation based view of the resilience of that particular application to a real-time view of the resilience in the case of monitoring and alerting of that particular application. And that is continuous improvement, because then what you can do is you can extend that thing that you've done out across the application set. You can extend that thing that you've done with different integrations and different connections across the different types of resilience. And before you know it, what you've got is real-time data that's flowing into the engine that's actually giving you that sort of real-time view. And of course, continuous improvement continues, back to the question previously, once you start to then have that data in place and that real-time data, you can start to apply those machine learning rules that starts to give you a predictive capability. So you go from baseline attestation once every year, assessing the resilience of something, to the ability to do it in a real-time way, to the ability to actually be predictive about it, at least for certain elements of the organization. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, we've got time for one more question. So the last one I'll ask you is, operational resilience is a regulation in the UK. What best practices are you seeing in building resilience?
So the single best practice that I'm seeing is the organizations who are deploying ServiceNow at the heart of it, if I'm completely honest. What other best practices am I seeing? The ability to, again, not boil the ocean, but understand what the ocean looks like. So to define as many of your important business services as you possibly can, but not to try and assess the resilience of all of them in one go. So to pick one, use that as a pilot, learn from your experience of doing that, get that data and that tooling in at the outset so that you can learn, so you're getting the insight as you go along, and then look to extend that across other important business services. I think that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really, really good practice is not getting too hung up on the results of that first assessment, because we've never had an ability in the past in our big financial services organizations to really just put our finger on the real-time resilience position of something, a service end to end like that. And so what happens is when you do that exercise of assessment, sometimes some stuff comes back that you don't really want to see. You've got red issues on facilities here, you've got red issues on IT here, you've got red issues on security and patching over here. And I think it would be very, very easy in that situation to be horrified, hands up, and say, we're all doomed, sort of thing. But of course, nothing has really changed. The resilience is the same as it was yesterday. You just have got the visibility to be able to measure it. And so I would say, you get that first measurement in place, don't overreact. Just look at where you can make those incremental improvements and scale it out. And I think that is final thing I would say on best practice is culture. It's all back to culture. It's always back to culture. Treat it as an opportunity for improvement. I think that's the way that the Bank of England and the regulators have intended it to be, is demonstrate that you're here, then demonstrate you're able to continually make improvements, and don't beat each other up along the way internally in your organization as you all try to do the best you can to improve that position. And I think what I found in where that's been done successfully is that operational resilience is like a very much a team sport. It's a collegiate thing. It requires a whole range of different stakeholders and quite senior executives to come together with a sort of common view of where they want to take the organization. And as I said earlier, that kind of is very connected then to the digital transformation agenda as well. So you put them all in the same place. They're talking about operational resilience together and how they can improve things. guess what? Actually, conversations start to emerge that are about, oh, well, maybe we should actually, focus on this area here collectively of digital transformation and fix this component together that actually underpins 3 or 4 different services that we all own. So those would be all good examples of best practice, I would say.
So Keith, I love that. That kind of wraps everything up so nicely, right? It's bringing systems together, it's bringing needs together, and ultimately it's coming together as a team to get to that point of operational resilience as quickly as possible, but also as smart as possible.
Sure.
So as always, I always enjoy chatting with you about this. And as you know, I could talk to you about this all day. And I'm sure that the folks that are on this fireside chat with us today got a lot of information that hopefully they can think about things a bit differently and approach things a bit differently and improve upon their path to digital transformation as well, and applying ServiceNow to all those areas that you discussed. So thank you so much. You gave us plenty to think about.
You're welcome.
Again, hopefully we can have this chat again soon and even dive deeper.
Yeah, I'd love to anytime. I love doing this stuff. So that's great. Thanks very much, Karen.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you all for taking the time today to spend with Keith and I and talk about strengthening operational resilience in the banking industry using ServiceNow. And if you do have any questions or you just want to continue this conversation, you always have Andy McLaughlin here to help you out. So his information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to him. He's a great guy and he's full of knowledge himself on this topic. In the meantime, thank you so much and have a wonderful end of your day. Take care.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.